What are the downsides of weed that people don't talk about? It can become your only personality trait. I'm at a college known for being notoriously heavy-handed on the weed culture. Some of my peers' only goal is when they are going to get their next high, and like they are so stuck in the culture that they just become sort of boring and their personality lacks dimension. I'm not someone who thinks the practice is evil, just got to use in moderation, like anything. I can't imagine this will get seen now. However, I'm going to comment because I rarely ever do. I am in my mid-20s studying to be a professional pilot, and have smoked habitually several times a day for the last several years. While I am still a large advocate for marijuana, I stopped smoking entirely about a month ago because I realized a few things. 1. I became complacent with my life and my surroundings, rarely wanting to make a change in my routine because I knew when I able to spark up. 2. I would spend extra cash on edibles, concentrates, weed, etc. Essentially having extra spending money meant it was going to get me high. 3. I felt as if I would make excuses to not see friends and family, so that I would ensure that I would be comfortable and at home with my shit in hand. 4. It becomes a nightly ritual, to the point where going to sleep without it sounded impossible. 5. Following number 4. You stop dreaming, due to the fact that THC hinders REM sleep. I never really understood this until I quit and started having incredibly memorable and vivid dreams. With all that said, I still believe it's a beautiful plant that has wonderful benefits. But, if you're at the point where you think that you can't live without it, I need you to know that nothing is healthy in excessive amounts. Not having an appetite if you're not high. You have to smoke heavily though to get to that point. When I started smoking I gained 10 pounds, when I kept smoking I lost 40. Been smoking every day for the past decade and am recently realizing that being too introspective can be a negative thing at times. I've been thinking too much and acting too little. I lost a significant chunk of my best friends in college because by senior year all they were focused on was weed. Since I didn't smoke we suddenly had nothing in common despite being close friends and classmates for years. Every fucking conversation at every hour of the day inevitably turned into reminiscing about the last time they got high, or planning out the next time they'd get together to smoke. Eventually I just stopped trying to keep in touch with them from day to day and we never really stayed as close since then. After about 10 years of use, my body has developed an allergy that I have never heard anyone else get. When I use THC, my sinus gets inflamed, nearly blocking the airway, forcing me to breathe through my mouth, making falling asleep very difficult. Also, the next morning the boogers I get are relentless. It is like all the stuff is coming back out my sinus. This almost always ends up with minor bleeding nose. It seems like most of my response has already been said, but I want to reiterate 3 major observations what I've noticed from my own semi-frequently weed consumption. 1. Demotivation. The impact from weed on motivation levels I find is in 2 parts. The first part is when you initially consume the weed, most people fall into a habit of eating food and watching something on TV. The second part I found is the next morning, I experience a type of weed hangover the following morning. I feel more groggy and more susceptible to just loading around the following day. 2. Anxiety. Things that aren't currently stressing you out may start to induce anxiety in you. While this isn't always the case, weed has the potential to worsen your mental state if you aren't careful. This impact became more pronounced when I smoked weed solo. Having other people around allowed me to be more present in the moment, whereas I was in my head when I was alone. 3. Food consumption. I found for me that continued weed use led to some unhealthy eating habits. The munchies are real and for often that not you are craving food that is not considered healthy. If this becomes a more common occurrence then your overall diet can go south quickly. The food consumption is a really interesting one. At first, when I started smoking, I was definitely like that. Me and my friends would want to go grab MCDs or some chips. But as I've gotten older, 24 now, I realized the opposite. When I smoke now, I don't want to eat anything unhealthy at all. It's like my body looks at some chips or something and goes nah. Instead I have lots of water to drink and either grapes, or pineapple, or oranges. Demotivation in heavy consumers. It is fine in moderation, but multiple times per day seems to suck the ambition from most people I've seen, including myself long ago. One thing that I never see brought up is the effect of marijuana on dreaming. Marijuana use can prevent the user from dreaming during regular sleep. When the user stops using marijuana for a while, they can experience night after night of extremely vivid dreams. I can only speak for my own experience, but I have heard this echoed by a co-worker's dad who started smoking again because he couldn't handle having acid trip dreams every night. I suspect that marijuana has some potent effect on REM sleep that will remain underdocumented until it is descheduled and more thorough research can be done. Anecdotally, I experience profound changes in energy levels if I smoke before bed. If I do it too often, it leads to difficulty falling asleep. But even a single use can cause me to wake and feel groggy and mentally unfit. Over the course of a week, this can lead to emotional regulation problems for me. I become cranky and impatient. I used to be a career pothead. I quit a year ago and the improvements in my quality of sleep are staggering. My whole life has gotten easier to manage. Both my roommates are heavy smokers, and they just think so slowly. It takes them forever to understand anything. They also forget a lot of stuff, like they'll step away from the dishes for a moment and then never finish them without prompting. The house smells like a coffin. I eat the occasional edible, but seeing how lethargic they are has convinced me to quit smoking pot entirely. I would say that as a long-term smoker that wants out, it has made me incredibly boring. If I have evening plans on the weekend but smoke anything in the day, then I'm far more prone to cancelling those nighttime plans. If I do attend those plans after smoking in the day, then I feel I'm not entirely there. Awkward silences, jokes don't land, keeping a conversation going becomes 10x harder, and I'm inevitably just waiting for an appropriate time to leave. Overall, it just kinda makes you socially awkward and super boring to be around in a social setting. Just from my experience. It's really bad for developing brains, i.e. anyone under 25. Because of all the lies people told about how marijuana was the worst drug ever, I was fairly skeptical of this claim. But the recent evidence is pretty clear that marijuana isn't good for development. More people need to hear this, since it changes the conversation quite a bit. I've noticed after the initial uptick in chatter, people tend to get really quiet, and zoned out in their own thoughts. When I used to smoke it, I found it had a dulling effect on my personality and conversational skills after the fact, too. Weed is for people that have found their way in life, it's not for people who are looking for the way. My uncle. In other words, as fun as it may seem when you're young. Get your shit together first: education, family, career, etc. It can overcorrect for anxiety and cause more anxiety. It can dull emotions in general. This can be good or bad. When you need to be empathetic or aware, you are less likely to be. It dulls focus. You can power through it and make that focus reappear if needed, but it's an uphill battle to get to that point, and if you lose focus again, you gotta rebuild it. Lowers short-term memory, which leads to less long-term memories, especially of details. It can interfere with sex drive in men. This has been studied and known. Not all men, but some. It can cause stomach pain in some people. It is mentally addictive, and hijacks the dopamine system. This can be reversed by not smoking, but it can make pleasures less pleasurable if you smoke heavily for a long term. Weed doesn't make me feel better. It just makes me not care as much about how bad I feel. That's something I said to a doctor a really long time ago, and I still think it's very true. It's not a solution, but if it wasn't for that, I would have cared enough to kill myself and wouldn't have lived to be 25. Thank you for watching Reddit Central. Make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss any new videos. Feel free to share any similar stories in the comments below.